We're going to start with the book, but then we'll segue into the movie and then go back to the book. How's that?
This is The Lonely Voice with Peter Orner from Texas Public Radio. I'm Yvette Benavides, and I'm thrilled to welcome to the conversation Alex Gordon, a Chicago-based editor and journalist, and you'll see why he's the perfect guest to join us today. This is a podcast where we celebrate the short story. That means we explore the worlds that authors build in just a few pages. We've taken that idea to heart so much, and we've even veered into an episode about poetry. And now, for this episode, we're talking about the novella Train Dreams by Denis Johnson. Every once in a while, a piece of fiction comes along that's too complex for a single story, yet too distilled to be an expansive novel. It lives in that haunting middle ground, the novella. A book that many critics call the perfect novella is our focus today. We're talking about Denis Johnson's Train Dreams. It was originally published in the Paris Review and later was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. This slim volume manages to pack an entire American century into just about 116 pages. It's a story that doesn't just sit on your shelf. You don't forget about it after you close the book. It haunts you like a dream. Doesn't it stand to reason then that someone would eventually adapt a movie from the novella? Train Dreams is the story of Robert Grenier, a laborer in the American West during the early 20th century. We follow him through the logging camps and the construction of the Great Northern Railway. But this isn't just a historical chronicle. It's a meditative, disorienting journey through grief, isolation, and the terrifying beauty of a wilderness that is slowly being erased by progress. We'll be discussing Denis Johnson's impressionistic storytelling, how we drift through time and memory. He shows us a man who survives unspeakable tragedy only to become a ghost in his own life or to quietly and temperately resist that fate. Alex Gordon enlightens us on some of the backstory of Denis Johnson's research for the book, and we'll see how some of those elements and scenes figure in the movie. Clint Bentley directed the movie and co-wrote the screenplay with Greg Quaidar. Joel Edgerton plays Robert Grenier. We're not film experts, but we love movies, especially those inspired by short works of fiction or that lend themselves to a podcast like ours where we just want to talk about stories. You know us. That's what we're all about. Whether you've read it 10 times or seen the movie 3 or 4 times or are hearing about Train Dreams for the first time today, grab a coffee, settle in. Let's head into the Idaho Panhandle. This is our special look at Train Dreams. Here now, Alex Gordon, Peter Orner, and I discuss Train Dreams, the novella, and the film.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to The Lonely Voice. This is our first sellout show. This is an Oscar-inspired Lonely Voice. We're going to be talking about the wonderful 2011 novella published by Denis Johnson, which was recently made into a Oscar Best Picture nominated film. We're going to talk about the film because we have some big disagreements about the film. But first, we're going to talk about the book, and I want to introduce my old friend, my college roommate, and many, many other things, including we were camp counselors together. Alex taught archery. I taught, embarrassingly, air riflery. I mean, how pathetic is that? In any case, Alex Gordon is a Chicago-based editor and journalist who most recently has detoured into the realm of marketing and media services. Alex has been a longtime journalist, including in college when he was the editor of the Michigan Daily, which, as the name implies, is a daily. It was a full-time job. Alex did not go to school. I didn't either. I worked for him. And in any case, we're thrilled that Alex is a guest on the show. And we're going to jump right into this short novel by Denis Johnson. This is actually, we normally do short stories on this show, although we have done a poem, but today we're doing a short novel that reads like a incredibly compressed story. For me, I love novels that feel like stories, to feel that compressed, and this is a great example. I've read it so many times now, I'm not even sure why I like it. And Yvette, you were telling me you thought you knew why I liked it. Do you want to tell me that?
Yeah, I know one of the reasons. I think I know one of the reasons maybe that you like it is because of the clarity and the compression, just as you were saying.
Yeah, it's an entire life, right?
It
An
is.
entire life from beginning to end in 112, 116 pages,
116.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not surprising at all to me why this was made into a film. And again, we're going to talk about the film and why we have vehement disagreements about the film, which maybe we can jump right into right away. Did you guys love the book? Do you love the book as much as I love the book? Even though on this, I don't know, fifth or sixth read, I was kind of asking myself, like I said, do I still love this book? It's hard to love a book after 6 times, but I think I still do.
I love it. Alex, do you love the book?
Yeah, I thought the book was incredible. I read it twice this week in preparation for the podcast, and yeah, in each read, I just found different passages and different parts that spoke to me. And again, this was reading it in a compressed amount of time. So yeah, I think it's a wonderful book.
So if we try to look at what is the alchemy of this book, I mean, would you call this a historical fiction?
No.
Who said no? Peter?
Yes.
Okay.
Historical fiction is like, I don't know, like Gone with the Wind or something.
No, but wait a second. But this.
I think it.
Go
I think
ahead.
it definitely has. I think it definitely has elements of this historical fiction. Peter's seemingly hatred of that genre aside, but
I just think it sounds so boring. It's a new thing where like something written in the Nixon era is suddenly historical fiction. But sorry, Yvette, I jumped in.
No, I was just thinking about how it has historical elements. I mean, Elvis is in the book, right? But it it's this idea of how, there's historical fiction gone bad, right? There's historical fiction that doesn't work because I think it sticks so close to the history that it forgets about the characters. But this is a book that somehow allows the character to be a character in a work of fiction. If we wanted to talk about it as historical fiction, but maybe we won't, I just think it's beautiful for how it holds the history of this place and this time, and all of that can even fall away because we're just looking at the main character and everything that he's going through and the beauty of the place and all of that. But anyway.
That's awesome. I was gonna say, it's interesting you bring up historical fiction because I was reading this morning about how he actually wrote it. And the genesis of it was he was, holed up in this cabin in Idaho that he bought, the second part of his life. And he just selected stories from newspapers, so like snatches of stories, like the story of the guy who gets shot by his dog was something he found in a newspaper. So despite these protestations, it kind of has its roots in historical fiction in that way.
Oh, wow. I love knowing that happened. I did not know that. Because it's supposed to be about the way Robert is responding to what's happening. We really see this so pointedly in the film. It's about the way that he responds to everything that is going on. And during this particular period, and it's a long period, it is his whole life, so many things are happening in our country and industrialization and all of that, everything that anybody's ever said about this book and the time period. But I think that what's really important is how we see Robert interacting with that, responding to it, not responding to it. I mean, I think that's what's so beautiful about the book for me. I mean, two things can be true, right? I mean, it can be a historical fiction that we kind of see the beauty in, that, right, Peter?
Yeah, my only thought is, I mean, anything said in the past is technically historical fiction, right? And so, this book opens in the summer of 1917. Robert Grenier took part in an attempt on the life of a Chinese laborer caught, or anyway accused of, stealing from the company stores of the Spokane International Railway in the Idaho Panhandle. And it's such and it's great that Alex is giving us context in terms of, where he got the story, that he just clipped it out of a newspaper. But it's all right there in that first paragraph, in that pause when he says, or anyway accused of. It makes an anecdote into fiction because it's speculating on a story that seems hard and fast. Robert Grenier took part in an attempt on the life of a Chinese laborer who was caught or anyway accused of stealing from the company stores. So immediately there's a sense of sort of like not sureness, and that is a characteristic of the book itself. And to me, that's what makes it a great piece of fiction. And by kind of categorizing it in a way that, kind of makes it does. And of course, as you say, it says a lot about the time frame between the early, from the 1910s all the way to the mid 60s, and has a lot to say about all of those, about at least kind of glancingly the events of that time. But it seems to me that there's a constant sort of sense of, is this real or is this not real? Did someone do something or didn't they do it? And that is what makes the book great, I think.
I totally agree with you along that point. I think one of the fascinating things about the book is that kind of play between, it's rooted in these like concrete things about building, bridges for trains and the highway. And even at the end when they did that kind of that laundry list of his life where he had never talked on a telephone and he watched TV when he came to town and he'd flown in an airplane, there's these concrete things. And then there's crazy, magic realism episodes, the whole, recurring wolf girl or wolf boy, things, and whether or not, the hallucinations about his wife and her spirit coming that one night and stuff. So I think it's that play between the, for lack of a better phrase, the historical fiction aspects of the book, and then like kind of the magic realism or the, inner, you see such a loner that, most of this book is him or his occasional interactions with eccentrics in the area.
Right. And I see the magical parts as being, kind of like visions, visitations, dreams, that the sense of things being actual because they're actually happening in his mind.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's kind of plays too with the stories that he hears from other people, and he kind of, it all inflates in his mind and creates kind of this mythological, which was, prevalent obviously in that age and that era and that, logging and all that.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have any other entertainment. So if you're taking a guy who's been shot by his dog into the hospital or into the clinic or whatever, and the guy can still talk, he's going to tell you a story. And that, as you suggest, I think feeds his imagination in ways that make the book so nuts, in a beautiful way.
I love about this character that he's this laborer that uses his hands to clear these spaces and touch these trees and these logs, and he's out there in nature, in sort of the wilderness part of the space. He basically has a hand in changing the landscape. But the other thing about the magic realism I was thinking about is how much there is there for us as readers to decide for ourselves what we think is true or truer than true. So was that his daughter? Was his daughter raised by wolves? Was he visited by his wife? I don't know for sure, but I can read the book, for the nth time and decide for myself, So there's a lot about creation for me in this book, like the things that he has a hand in with, numberless other men working in these ways, but also the creation of these sorts of narratives. We don't have like this tremendous amount of an inner monologue that's very revealing to us about exactly how he feels, but we do have the narration that's just like these simple sentences that are somehow charged with so much emotion incongruously. I don't know how he did that. Like they're just these simple statements that knock you over. How did he do that? I don't know how he did that. But anyway,
You can nail it on the head there. It's such a, the writing is just so clear and concise and beautiful in its simplicity. I mean, I would imagine that's part of what really appeals to Peter and kind of something that carries over into his own work, in my opinion.
The distillation of just, this is a paragraph that I love. By the way, I lost my copy when I was reading it the other day at the doctor's office. I left it. It fell behind the chair and I forgot to pick it up because I was trying to read it to calm myself down while I was doing my blood pressure check. Anyway, so the book was gone at the doctor's, and I had another copy at home, and that copy I picked up at a used bookstore someplace, and it is the most heavily annotated book I've ever had in my life. Somebody wrote on every single line something. There's page numbers, there's references, there's lines go doubling back to other things. It was the most annoying experience to have to read someone else's comments, but it actually kind of fun too, because every time something would happen in the margins, it would be what happened with an exclamation point or 3 exclamation points. You know, she's back, Kate's back! Exclamation point, exclamation point. Anyway, but there's a paragraph I wanted to read. Later in his long life, Grenier confused the chronology of the past and felt certain that the day he'd viewed the world's fattest man that evening was the very same day he stood on 4th Street in Troy, Montana, 26 miles east of the bridge, and looked at a railway car carrying the strange young hillbilly entertainer Elvis Presley. Presley's private train had stopped for some reason, maybe for repairs here in this little town that didn't even merit its own station. The famous youth had appeared in a window briefly and raised his hand in greeting, but Grenier had come out of the barber shop across the street too late to see this. I love that he wasn't even there to see, and that Johnson doesn't even allow him to see Elvis Presley. He just hears the story of people who did because he was inches away. Reminds me of the story my grandfather used to tell about seeing Babe Ruth wave from a train window. In any case, there's constantly these incredible, beautiful details that are just indelible, you know. And I can see again why somebody would, you know, years later want to make a movie of this, or you try to make a movie of it.
We're gonna go there yet, or
Yeah, go ahead.
Like you said, that part that you read there just kind of like, I think goes back to what we were talking about. Like, I love for a book like this, if it didn't have that mooring and kind of, you know, you hit this phrase historical fiction with, I mean, I didn't look up, but I'm not sure if Elvis was in that Montana town. I have a feeling maybe he was, but I love how that anchors you, kind of like, you know, all the stuff he was talking about, the things he builds with his hands to this sense of place. But then there's that kind of that whole episode with the world's fattest man, and it's, you know, we're far removed from the days of those kind of shows and stuff, but that whole thing is another dreamy, the way he describes it, you know, it's this kind of dreamy magical realism type episode that kind of shows the dichotomy between those two things that I think are in play in the novel or the novella that make it so wonderful.
Yeah, I agree. As you were talking, I was thinking about how I don't know if seeks out is the right word, but how he happens to go to these sort of places where there are spectacles. Like, why doesn't he just go to see like a Barbara Stanwyck movie or something? But instead, it's just like this outrageous, you know, kind of spectacle. I don't know. I don't know what that means, but I was just as you were talking, I thought about that.
The one time he does not seek out that entertainment, the whole the episode with the Queen of Galveston and
Oh, yes.
the sister.
And maybe we should hold on to that, because the movie bothered me so much I wasn't able to finish it. So I don't know if they cover that, but I think it's fascinating that Johnson ends the book on that, or towards the end of that. But let's give a little bit of context before we get into the movie. And that is to say that there's 2 huge events that happen pretty early on in the book. One is that he is in the very first line. Robert takes part in an attempt on the life of a Chinese laborer who the implication is falsely accused of stealing, or certainly doesn't deserve to die because of the accusation of stealing. And there is this incredible, and they do a good job in the movie of this scene, I think. But on the very first page, she says that Robert participates only because he sees this guy being, you know, accosted because he's trying to escape, and he helps because just instinctively he helps. And this results seemingly in the laborer's death, although that's not really clear to me in the book itself. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But that obviously, you know, is incredibly weighing. That opens the book. That's what Robert weighs on Robert's conscience his whole life. And the second huge event, or let's say the third, is, you know, Robert does marry, and in this beautiful, and again they do this beautifully in the movie. It showed
Like the movie.
him getting together. There were parts of it, sure, absolutely. And but in, Robert getting together with Gladys is very, again, incredibly quick. In the book, it's established and it's very beautiful. And they have this picnic and they build this cabin and they have a kid. And then what happens? He's away at work, logging or working on the bridge, I forget which. And he comes home on the train and all hell has broken loose because there's a major wildfire that has consumed the entire area and he cannot find his wife and kid. And that happens on what page? It happens so fast. Book isn't even half over when his life is over in some ways, right? The only problem is that Robert has to live his life after that. I guess that's the impulse for making the movie, right? Is trying to figure out how Robert does live on after that. His wife and child are burned up, basically, or he doesn't know what happens to them, but they're certainly not, they're missing.
Well, that's one of the amazing things about the book is that, normally that would be the novella, that would be kind of typical plotting that would come much further on, and you would, build up this relationship with Gladys and the daughter and this horrible tragedy. And, but yeah, the fact that it happened so early and then the rest of his life is kind of like, meandering series of events. I think the brilliance of the book. Like a real life is not structured that way. So
he gets a taste of happiness, but we never even feel it. All we feel is the loss. From the book it's like a brick of loss. It's a tiny little book.
I'm just saying for emotional impact, if you're going to build this like a typical story, you'd have that you're this wonderful woman and they'd have this great life. And then all of a sudden this tragedy would strike. And it happens so early. And then it's kind of these anecdotes and how he copes and doesn't cope and stuff, which makes it so interesting. Much more interesting than a typical narrative.
It is interesting that the novella starts with his part in the near lynching of the Chinese laborer, because as readers we carry that into page 2, page 3, page 4. We have to carry the weight and the burden of that into the rest of the story, and it just how do I say this? It just becomes part of the character that we accept. And the fire, to go back to what Peter was saying, in my little copy, it's on page 39. And, we can read almost any paragraph in this little chapter and again, just be gut punched. But,
I was having trouble finding it because I thought, well, the fire must start a chapter. It doesn't.
No,
it
it
happens
doesn't.
Midway in a chapter.
Yeah, in chapter 4, right. Sometimes the ideas stormed over him, positively stormed into his thoughts like an irresistible army, that Gladys and Kate had escaped the fire, and that he should look for them everywhere in the world until he found them. And he doesn't really do that. I mean, he does, to a certain extent, but not really. I mean, just within the confines of the town. And it's just an interesting idea that he has to sort of accept for himself just the possibility that they are out there, because he finds no remnants of them. He finds no evidence that they died, that they are somewhere, in the rubble in the house, in the ashes. So I don't know what I'm saying, except that this is all part of, of his story. This person with no parents and no heirs, this person who, what is his story? That Denis Johnson gives Robert this story, this person with no real roots, and he is all alone in the world, in this very vast landscape. As America is changing, as the landscape is changing, he is not really changing. But, and I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. I don't know what the sort of the canine element here means. I love it. I love the whole thing with the dogs.
I was gonna say, it's funny, at some point, or I don't know if it's a couple people, he's called a hermit. Like someone says, the world needs the preacher and the world needs the hermit, referring to him.
Yes.
But then if you actually reading the book, and he seeks out solitude, but he doesn't, it's not like a part of his, it's not his philosophy, I guess, or thing. I mean, he's always meeting up with people and talking to people and being social when he can. It's going into town and, he's interested in other people's stories. He praised them. In fact, like the guy going back to the guy who's dog shoots him, he gets angry with the guy because the guy won't tell the story. And he's like dying to hear just how this could happen. I love that whole film package cracks me up. Which is another great part of the book. There's this horrible loss and this horrible tragedy, and there's also the humor of that scene alone is great. So I found that interesting. That people call him a hermit, yet he was always seeking people out, or when he had a chance and stuff. But he didn't crave that. He didn't crave being alone too. It just was him. Dogs came and went, and he kind of was happy when they had a dog, but then he didn't mind when he didn't have a dog. Or
I think what you guys are raising as the central question of the book is in a sense of, who is he after the fire? Who is he after he's lost his wife and kid? And I think you kind of suggest like he doesn't sort of adapt. He doesn't change. He is who he is. And I think the question of the book is, who is this guy? And I think that's what the movie tried to solve, and in my view got so wrong. I'll just do it. Let's get into it. More than but here's the thing is like, I think that to me, it's a great book of bafflement, and the movie makers in their good-heartedness and their attempt. And I'm always hard on movies. Alex knows this, because I think like if you got millions of dollars and a crew of like 1 billion people, like you always you have a responsibility to get a story right, and so often they don't because it's too bloated. And this movie tries so hard and does such a beautiful job of creating a scene and the light and I thought the visuals and the setting, everything was wonderful. What I think I got wrong is this, and you guys can tell me I'm wrong, but I think the movie created a stoic character, and the book has a baffled character, and a baffled character is really hard to pull off. And Alex, you pointed out like the whole conversation about the guy whose dog shoots him is so, the timing of it, and we should read a little bit of it because it's an incredible scene. He says, first of all, they talk about having sex with cows, to put it more politely, but Peterson's voice sounded wet from fear and passion. I'm saying it gets dark and the moon gets full and there's creatures God did not create. He made a strangling sound. God, this hole in me hurts when I cough, but I'm glad I don't have to try and sleep through the night waiting on that wolf girl and her pack to come after me. But did you do like the Indian told you to? Did you shoot your dog? No, he shot me. Oh, Grenier, mixed up and afraid. He'd entirely forgotten that part of it. He continued to watch the woods on the other side, but that night no spawn of unnatural union showed herself. Anyway, my point, if I have a point, is that this guy is baffled and confused and yet lives all those years being baffled and confused with a certain skills. He can do things and he can survive, but the world is a baffling place to him. And I think that is a hard thing to get on paper, much less film.
I can see your point in how he was portrayed in the movie. And I think he was definitely kind of portrayed as like the noble stoic who these things happened to him and he just kind of persevered on, which I mean, of course there's an element of that in the book as well. That's not, he's baffled, but he is stoic in the book.
True. No, he builds a cabin. He builds 2 cabins. Yeah.
I mean, it keeps, and there's attention paid in the book to like the different shelters he builds, or there's like at one point, I forget how I'm always fascinated, put to shame by his skills in terms of just being able to do things. Like he builds a blanket of spruce and stuff. I'm like, makes it actually sound like he just didn't cover himself with leaves. He actually wove something from the thing. So I don't know. Like, I think I can see your point in the film where they kind of simplified his character, because he could be, you have to make compromises when you make a film.
In a way, I think they actually made his character more complex, and that's the irony to me. Is they made it. I mean, the character in the movie seems to have more elements to him than the fictional guy, but the fictional guy is so real to me. That's kind of what I'm saying. If I'm saying anything,
I think it's that missed. I mean, I think the filmmakers, in the same way we're doing in this conversation, are interpreting the character in the book and the meanings and the subplots and the everything that's in the margins, and they chose a direction with the character, and we don't think in this film, I don't think they did it. Like, they definitely didn't do it. They got to make them more likable and this and that. I think they just interpreted it a certain way. They didn't give them I think they could have easily, it's not in the book, but in the movie when he meets the woman who lives up in the smoke tower, like I thought in the movie, like in a typical movie that, oh no, you're going to have this, romance with this woman. And this is going to be a whole, thing. And he kind of meets her and it's just another episode. And then you never hear from her again.
But Dennis Johnson knew better than to even go near that plot element, So anyway, I feel bad because I'm,
You have to feel bad.
The movie is the movie. I just have to think about it in those terms, It's the director's interpretation or whatever. And I feel like there's enough. I'm going to tell you what was so gorgeous about the movie, besides the obvious things that the cinematography and all the visuals and things you've been talking about, Peter, but it's the voiceover, which is Denis Johnson, right? So
yeah.
I have this. My book is all annotated too, but I like this. He liked the grand size of things in the woods, the feeling of being lost and far away, and the sense he had that with so many trees as wardens, no danger could find him. And I was looking at it just now and thinking, why did I underline this part? And I thought about, in my head, I know this is so dumb, but in my head, I'm reading it in the voice of the guy in the movie doing the voiceover. So, it's beautiful. There is Denis Johnson in the movie that's so evident, and it's so clear to me. But yes, thank God he didn't have a romance built into this film. And there are other things that I think, as you said, Alex, are compromises because they could not possibly be captured the way they happen in the book. I think you're just restricted by so many things. But and it would have made a very different kind of tone and texture in the movie that I think would have made it so scattered. The movie, I feel like the movie is one thing. The movie wants to be one thing, seems to be one thing. And really, somehow in 116 pages, it is also just one thing, even though it includes a lot of other sorts of elements that are a little bit, lurid or sordid or violent or graphic. I don't know, and it just works, in and of itself, the book, and in and of itself, the movie. Peter, you just need to watch all the way to the end, and I think you'll see good.
It's true. I couldn't take anymore. I couldn't take it anymore. I appreciated the beauty of it, and I just couldn't take it anymore. And I guess I take this stuff too personally. I should just acknowledge what you're saying, Yvette, that, yeah, they're two different things. They're two different things, as they always are.
Sure.
But when a book is so personal to you, it is sort of a personal offense. But I think in this case, I guess I disagree partly that it wasn't possible to make a more uncomfortable movie. And I think the choice they made, and they always make this choice, is to make it a comfortable movie. Make it a guy who's grieving his wife and daughter in the most sort of understandable way. I was going to say palatable. I take that back.
But I
What
want.
did you think of? Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say I want it to be understand. I don't know. I want. No, I want it to be beautiful. In a way that's different. The novel is beautiful. I mean, the novella is beautiful. The movie is beautiful.
What do you thought of the movie as a cover song? Dylan wrote All Along the Watchtower, a wonderful song, done in very Dylan-esque, and then Jimi Hendrix took it in a completely different direction. There were probably those at the time who were, tisking, what happened. And they both can exist and both be wonderful and both speak to each other in certain ways and then, be completely discordant in other ways. I mean,
I think in that example of those two, of Jimi Hendrix's version of that song and the actual song, you have somebody who's kind of making like an even more difficult art off of one difficult art. I think you're making easier art off for difficult art. That's my argument. And I know how you can just sound like such an asshole dissing what people love. And Alex and I, we have this conversation all the time because I do this fairly frequently. So I get that it sucks to hear it, and I don't mean to rain on your parades, but I feel like the movie disappointed me in the sense of it had a shot at making it as weird, as uncomfortable sometimes, and as actual, just real. You know, the movie seemed like a fantastical version of a book that is much more grounded in the ugliness of real life.
There's so much fantastical things in the book that we've talked about, and I think the movie did even better than a book can in terms of portraying those fantastical images and such.
Sure.
What if you had seen the movie without ever having known about the novella? What if What if you had just seen that movie? What would you?
Sure, I would have been fun. This is a beautifully lit.
I was gonna say I knew it was based on a novella, but I hadn't read the novella before I saw the movie, and I turned to my wife. It was catnip for me. I'll admit it. 5 minutes in,
Yeah.
Beautifully lit film that takes place on, it wasn't filmed in suburban Georgia for tax credits. It was actually filmed
Brooklyn. Thank God. No, it wasn't about Brooklyn. I'll give it that.
Exactly. I mean, I turned here 5 minutes. I go, this is the greatest movie I've ever seen. Obviously being
Here's
little.
why I think
I'm like, this is the greatest. Like,
You've ever seen it is that Waukegan movie, Alex? What's it called?
oh God, Ghost Light.
Oh,
Ghost
Ghostlight. Now there's a movie.
It's the only movie you've
But can I just say,
since Breaking Away came out in 1979. That's a
right.
and
How she weighs them.
which Dancing the Sundance Kid, Breaking Away, Housekeeping, and
Yeah.
Mount Rushmore films.
those are it. But I just want to say one last thing, and I'll shut up about this. Is I thank the movie because it brought me back to a book that I probably may not have picked up again. It is one of the very few books in my whole life that when I finished the last sentence, the first time I read it, and I'm not any huge we've talked about Denis Johnson a number of times on this show before, and I have immense respect for him, and love him, but he's not my, I'm not going to reach for Denis Johnson as somebody when I need something. I'm going to reach for Mavis Gallant or somebody like that. But when I finished Train Dreams, I immediately started it again and read it a second time that day. And that rarely has happened, if ever. And this movie, my annoyance with it brought me back to the book. And so I appreciate it for that.
I mean, it's interesting you say that because having read it, I don't want to brag, it's a 110-page book. Like I read it twice this week. It is the kind of book like you can almost put on, like, it feels like you can put it on like an album and just kind of play it for an hour and just,
Yeah.
It's got tracks almost in terms of each of those scenes are like, oh, this is, the fire is a big tragic song. And then the funny little ditty is the guy getting shot by the dog. And, it kind of reads almost like that. You can pick up anywhere in the book after you've read it once and just kind of start it in the middle and then read, through that way. So go ahead.
I love that. Yeah, I love thinking about it that way. But look at how he's when he's in nature in the book, it just feels like this is who he is, right? And as things are modernizing, as he can dip into those contexts, and he's curious, sort of, and then he goes back into nature. So there's something for me there that the movie does really well.
Saw that scene in the movie where he sees the moon landing or the space orbit. I think it's orbiting
Yes.
on the TV. He's kind of like, "What's that?" And the woman's like, "They're in space." He's like, "It's interesting." And then he just goes back. He was like, "Oh wow, that's pretty crazy. They did that." All right.
That you nailed it. That is exactly right. I love that about the character, and I think the movie does that really well. And Peter, you have to see the ending. You have okay.
Did you see the plane scene? Did you get to the plane scene in the movie?
No, I never got to the plane scene.
my
I love the
goodness.
plane scene in the book.
Yeah, because it's kind of like that too. It plays on that, like it's just like it's the same when he goes up to the fire tower in the movie. Kind of like, he's like, wow, that's really cool that you can see all that.
And that's in the movie, and that's in the book too. It's just in a different way. He's just not with a.
But I want you guys to talk about that. I want you to talk about that. And there's something with the moon example that's there. That here is Robert in the thick of, in the forest, in the mud, in his grief. He is just sunk in these spaces. He is thick in these spaces. And when he allows himself to come out, he doesn't just go into town and go see the spectacles, but he is he is moved sort of outside of himself, as if up suspended in the air, or looking at a television set. I want you to talk about that idea because I think it's very important. And I'm just going to say this. I mean, you turned to your wife and you said, "This is the best movie I've ever seen." I at the end of the movie, I was sobbing. I was sobbing. I couldn't breathe. I could not breathe.
It is what it is. And if that impact on you, then that's it's
But let
important
me
to say.
but let me connect it to it was the voiceover again. It was the image of him and everything we had been through during the movie and the book, but during the movie, but also the quote from the Macy character,
Yeah.
the Peoples character,
Macy was great.
and you. How do I say it? There's a different kind of grieving for me than just what he has lost, but what it was. I can't explain. I can't put it in words, but it was kind of like what the nation had lost, what all of us have lost. I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying. I mean, I was. I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying. What am I saying, Alex? What am I trying to say?
So it's hard to encapsulate. I'm glad to hear that. I'm not glad. Yeah, that the movie moved you so much because like the whole genesis of this is the minute I finished it, I texted Peter and another friend of ours who runs insane text thread with all the time, and I was trying to find. I said something like Train Green's greatest movie ever, and then Peter wrote back with immediately tearing me, not just saying like I later sent him a text saying this is how you might have wanted to say it. He said like he just said
Yeah, you corrected my text and made it more polite.
what
Yeah, you said, "Holy hell, watch Train Dreams."
what was your response?
I'm trying to find it, but I was, I was.
I said holy hell, Train Dream. That Train Dreams. Just wow.
It's a fine movie. It's just not as singular as this book and uncomfortable as this book. Early on, there's this incredible scene that he recalls as a boy having met this guy who was dying after being robbed and shot.
Oh yeah.
And the guy confesses to the little boy his worst sins on the planet Earth in a story that is so devastating. I mean, it hit me. As you say, like the book's sort of made up of set pieces and somehow they come together to form this guy's life. But that memory, yeah, I suppose you couldn't film that, but what if you tried? And so that's my only point is the book feels the movie feels designed to tug at our heartstrings, whereas the book is something more.
It is. I'm going to say it is in the movie, but it's sort of sidewise.
Okay, well,
Yeah. That it's not the whole thing. Not all of
You
it.
go back and watch the movie again at this point after having.
Yeah.
I think we're both right, Peter. I mean, I think what you're overlooking is the small miracle that a movie in this day and age like this is made. That someone gave them all this money to go shoot out in the woods, and do something like this, considering how much of the output the movie studios these days is franchise stuff or IP. And that, what a great thing that it got recognized. That means that many more people had to go, see it or aware of it, or it's always on the list now of Academy Award nominees. And if even just a small percentage of those people go out and seek out this novella and realize that the novella is, there's always going to be compromises when you have to, adapt something to film from a novel. I'm sure there's hardcore, Lord of the Rings people that feel the 9 hours or 10 hours of Lord of the Rings films they made left out, so many crucial things. And how can you understand, Gollum and without having the scene? And those, films are exhaustive. So, and that's how many pages it text and 10 hours, and they had 2 hours to make, or an hour and a half. I think it's a relatively short film.
I don't want to see a movie that's exactly like the book. I mean, it's inspired by, maybe if we just look at it that way.
Actually, go back to the cover song. It's like the difference between someone who interprets a song and the difference between like American Idol or those things when people just go in and do like.
You got. I mean, obviously, what you're saying is all right, and we wouldn't have movies if I was the only audience. I get that, but what there was something about this, and it kind of goes to what you're saying about its indiness, its sort of independence, the fact that, oh my God, how could they even made this movie this day and age that made it? And you guys are gonna beat me up for this, but made it even a little bit more insidious for me in the sense that I think. There was something about the actor's face and whoever, I think you may have been the and I may be completely wrong, but it was sort of like a little bit, not a little bit, a lot to this viewer, self-congratulatory. Like, look at me. I have brought this novella to the screen and in all its well-lit glory, and I just feel like it doesn't, and that's all I'm saying. And it just felt like a little bit self-congratulatory in the sense of the book is sort of like very weirdly just not that. It just isn't that, is the beauty of the book. And it's not fair what I'm saying. It's not.
I thought I thought Edgerton was a very good choice for this, very kind of. You said to me the other day, brooding, that all of this brooding with him. I don't know. I found him to be to me, he just looked full of sorrow. His eyes or something. To me, he looked suitably sad, suitably disconnected, but also,
Totally agree.
but also sort of.
Yeah, I think that's the problem.
I mean, I thought it was.
Was suitable. That's my.
Oh no.
I mean, I'm sure there was, a lot of, makeup and magic movie stuff, but it kind of felt like they kept him the same age from when he was, 20 to when he was 80. Like they didn't like do all sorts of distracting old age makeup and stuff. He just kind of had the same face.
It was very, yes, you're absolutely right. Now that you're saying it, I think it was so subtle, the change at when he was supposed to be much, much older. It was so subtle.
Yeah. I love that about it. It was not about, there were no, and the movie did a nice job of that in terms of,
yes,
again, there wasn't a lot of like, I don't know, the usual historic epics like that. I'm not trying to call this a historic epic, but there's a lot of nods to, the changes and stuff, and all of a sudden, in this there were subtle things, and there's a scene with the TV and the moon, but it's it's a small little thing, I think they show in the movie, and it's hard to at this point now confusing in the book, but I think they show him on the train looking at the new highway bridge.
Yes.
At one point and stuff, but there's not a lot of like, there's not a lot of scenes where there's not like a montage, like it's not structured. So he goes into town 4 different times, and you can see every time the cars are different. And one time it's, Andrew's sisters, and the next time it's Elvis music, then the next time it's Beatles music, like a cliche type historical drama would be.
It's not Forrest Gump, it's
yeah, exactly. That's what I've been wanting.
Forrest Gump.
Exactly.
And although I don't know, I mean, I'd watch Forrest Gump for Gary Sinise. Gary Sinise could have played this guy, or Philip Seymour Hoffman. I want somebody baffled. I mean, I'd even take John Belushi in his last and a much unsung role in Continental Divide. But anyway, that's a deep cut. But
there was a great guy, right? So like Greco.
Less Continental Divide. where anyway, but to go back to the book, I want to read just, I mean, there's no way to capture this in anything other than the page. I mean, that's just it. That's my only point. It's not much of a point, but I mean, there has been movies that are weirder that I think do attempt to kind of, like you said, make a like my point about being like up the ante on the weirdness in a different way, make Along the Watchtower a different.
I haven't read it, but One Battle After Another, was based on a Thomas Pynchon novel. I don't know which one off the top of my head. And from what I understand, they're very different, loosely. It's a lucid.
Sure. And people could probably make the same argument I'm making. I'm just saying that in a book that is about grief in a singular way, I think they made it about grief in a more universal way. And I think that's obviously a good thing and moved a lot of people. And I'm glad for that. He found the wood stove lying on its side. This is after the fire. He's gone back to the cabin. He found the wood stove. This is how powerful this fire was. It knocked over the wood stove, which you can imagine how heavy that would be. He found the wood stove lying on its side with its legs curled up under it like a beetle's. He righted it and pried at the handle. The hinges broke away and the door came off. Inside sat a chunk of birch, barely charred, which, by the way, not to be all firefighter here, but that's true to life. If a compartment that is secure from the fire would be completely untouched. So this birch is uncharred. And he says, Gladys, he said out loud, everything he loved lying ashes around him. That's interesting. There's no in there. Everything he loved lying ashes around him. But here, this thing she touched and held. I just think that's, again, it's what makes the book so great and makes the fire scenes in the book so vivid to me that they're more real than the dramatizations in the movie. But that's just how it goes.
I could be wrong, and if I'm wrong, I apologize. But I think one of the crazy things I did read was that anecdote as well was based on something he read in the newspaper.
Wow.
That there was a fire and the only thing left was this birch log. And the fact that he collected all these little snippets and then somehow crafted them into this just, speaks to the wonder of the book. We need you to see the movie. You need to finish the movie.
Okay.
Grenier himself lived more than 80 years, well into the 1960s. In his time, he traveled west to within a few miles of the Pacific, where he'd never seen the ocean itself, and as far east as the town of Libby, 40 miles inside Montana. He had one lover, his wife Gladys, owned 1 acre of property, 2 horses, and a wagon. He'd never been drunk. He never purchased a firearm or spoken into a telephone. He'd ridden on trains regularly, many times in automobiles and once on an aircraft. During the last decade of his life, he watched television whenever he was in town. He had no idea who his parents might have been, and he left no heirs behind him. Almost everyone in those parts knew Robert Grenier, but when he passed away in his sleep sometime in November of 1968, he lay dead in his cabin through the rest of the fall and through the winter, and was never missed. A pair of hikers happened on his body in the next spring. Next day, the two returned with a doctor, who wrote out a certificate of death, and taking turns with the shovel they found leaning against the cabin, the 3 of them dug a grave in the yard, and there lies Robert Grenier.
Denis Johnson is the author of Train Dreams. This has been The Lonely Voice with Peter Orner from Texas Public Radio. Thanks so much to Alex Gordon for joining us. Alex Gordon is a Chicago-based editor and journalist. Jacob Rosati composed our theme music. Dan Katz is Texas Public Radio's news director. I'm Yvette Benavides.